Before her tragic death, Princess Diana wrote a secret letter meant only for Prince William. Hidden for years, it held her final confession, warning, and goodbye. When William finally read it, he broke down in tears. What did it say? And why was Harry never meant to see it? A letter sealed in love and pain, the hidden message Diana left behind. Before the world lost her, Princess Diana left behind something almost no one knew existed. A letter so personal, so raw, it was meant to reach only one person, Prince William. She didn't write it for the monarchy. She didn't write it for history books. She wrote it as a mother, knowing her time was running out. The letter was her way of saying everything she wasn't allowed to say out loud. It was her goodbye, her confession, and her final warning all in one. Diana gave instructions that the letter should only be delivered when William was old enough to understand. Not when he was young and still grieving. Not when he was surrounded by royal handlers and press cameras. She wanted him to read her words when he was old enough to look past the headlines and into her heart. For years, the letter was kept secret, hidden, protected by the one person Diana trusted most, her former butler, Paul Burrell. It was never logged in any official record. No photographs, no archives, just one letter, locked away like a sacred truth. It was more than just a message. It was a mirror. A letter where Diana poured out everything she had been carrying, her pain, her fears, her love. It wasn't polished. It wasn't edited. It was real. "If you're reading this, then you are ready," she wrote. "Ready to know me, not the version they showed you." When William finally read that letter, as a man, not a boy, the impact was immediate. Sources close to him said he broke down. Uncontrollable tears, shaking, silent sobs. In that moment, it wasn't Prince William reading it. It was a son hearing his mother for the first time in years. But what did the letter actually say? That's where the next chapter begins, with the truth about Diana's love story that never had a fair ending. A love story turned tragedy, Diana's painful truth about Charles. Inside the letter, Diana didn't hold back. She told William the whole story, not the royal version, but her truth. She wrote about Prince Charles, not as a king, not as the future head of state, but as the man she once loved deeply. She described the early days as magical. She said Charles made her feel safe, seen, wanted. In her words, he was my calm, at first, but the magic didn't last. Diana confessed how quickly she felt the shift, how Charles became distant, cold, and emotionally unavailable. She said she felt like a stranger in her own home, isolated, humiliated, and often gaslighted. "I gave him everything," she wrote, "and he gave his heart to someone else." She didn't name Camilla, but the meaning was clear. Diana painted the picture of a marriage that was never just between two people. She said William deserved to know the truth about why his childhood felt like it was crumbling from the inside out. She described how she would cry alone at night, how she'd put on a smile in front of the cameras and pretend everything was fine, because that's what the palace expected of her. But behind closed doors, she was breaking. She wanted William to understand that none of it was his fault. Most of all, she needed him to know that love, real love, shouldn't look like that. It shouldn't make you feel small. It shouldn't demand silence. That part of the letter marked a turning point. It wasn't just about Charles. It was about power, control, and the emotional cost of being royal. Diana made it clear. The institution didn't protect her. It watched her unravel. "Never let duty bury your heart," she warned, "or you'll wake up one day and not recognize yourself." As William read those lines, people close to him said he looked haunted. The fairy tale he had been raised to believe in was shattered. But it wasn't bitterness Diana left him with. It was understanding. And just when it seemed the pain couldn't run deeper, Diana revealed why she wrote the letter in the first place, and why she waited until he was grown to read it. That's what we uncover next. She knew he'd be king one day. Why Diana timed the letter. Diana never wrote that letter in haste. She wrote it with a mother's instinct, and with the quiet, heartbreaking certainty that she wouldn't be around to guide William herself. She knew exactly who her son was growing up to be. Not just a future king, but a boy who'd be handed the weight of the world long before he was ready. And so she timed her message with care. It wasn't meant for a child's eyes. It was written for a man, for the leader he'd one day become. She wanted him to read her words without confusion or blind loyalty to the institution around him. She wanted him to see the system for what it really was and understand what it had done to her and what it might try to do to him. Diana didn't want William to carry her pain, but she needed him to know it, so he wouldn't repeat her mistakes or suffer in silence the way she had. In the letter, she told him plainly, "One day you'll sit where your father sits now, and they'll ask you to smile, to speak, to shake hands and bow. But behind every ceremony is a cost. Behind every smile, a silence." She spoke of masks, the ones she had to wear, the ones he would be asked to wear. How in the royal world your feelings come last. Diana wanted him to be prepared not just for the crown, but for the loneliness that came with it. She warned him that people would try to mold him into something he wasn't. "Don't let them harden you," she wrote. "Don't let the title turn you into someone you wouldn't recognize." And then came the line that William never forgot. "You were always my truth." Just 5 words, but they carried everything. Her love, her faith in him, her hope that even after everything, he would remain grounded, human, kind. She reminded him that before the palace, before the press, before duty, he was her son, and she was always with him. This part of the letter wasn't bitter. It was tender, honest, but it carried weight. Because Diana knew that truth has a cost inside the royal family. She'd paid that price every day. She didn't want William to suffer in the same way, but she also didn't want him to walk into the crown blindly. That's why she waited. That's why the letter was locked away. Because when you're young, you love your family with blind faith. But Diana needed William to read her words when he was strong enough to see behind the curtain and still choose to be different. But even with all her careful planning, one truth remained. The letter had to be hidden. Not from William, but from everyone else. What it said, who it was for, could never be public. And the way it was kept secret was just as powerful as the letter itself. Because inside Kensington Palace, buried behind the royal routines and pristine facades, was a message that no one but her eldest son was ever meant to find. Secrets buried in Kensington, the message that no one knew existed. For years, no one outside Diana's most trusted circle even knew the letter existed. It wasn't part of any estate inventory. It wasn't listed in royal records. It wasn't catalogued with her personal effects. It was invisible, hidden on purpose, because Diana understood better than anyone that some truths weren't safe in the palace. Sources say the letter was kept in a private case under her writing desk at Kensington Palace, locked tight, guarded like treasure. After her death, it didn't go to the royal archivists or the executors of her estate. It passed quietly, hand to hand, through people who had once served her, people who still carried her trust, even after she was gone. All signs point to Paul Burrell, the one man Diana reportedly confided in during her darkest days. If he did keep the letter safe, he never used it for fame. He never sold it. He never spoke publicly about its contents. That alone speaks volumes. He knew the letter wasn't just paper. It was Diana's final voice to the one person she couldn't bear to leave behind unprepared. What's even more heartbreaking is what didn't happen. Prince Harry, her younger son, never received a letter like it. According to royal insiders, Diana had only written one. It was addressed to William and only William, perhaps because she saw in him the future role he would have to carry, or perhaps she simply knew he would be the one to carry her legacy. The decision to keep Harry in the dark has fueled questions. Did she fear the letter would be leaked if more people knew? Or did she believe Harry's path would be different, outside the palace, free from its pressures? No one can say for sure. But the fact remains, this letter, full of secrets, was never meant for public eyes. It's been said that even now, the actual copy of the letter is kept in a sealed container close to William, locked away and guarded like the crown jewels. Not because it's valuable in gold or diamonds, but because it's sacred. A message too private, too painful, too personal to ever be read by the world. And yet, even in its silence, the letter has changed everything. Because the day William finally read it, everything about him shifted. The prince the public thought they knew suddenly stood a little taller, a little colder, a little more distant from the palace machine. Something inside him changed forever. And that moment, the moment William held Diana's final words in his hands, would be one he'd never forget. The next chapter is the one that breaks your heart. The day William read it, and what it did to him. William's tears in the quiet, the day he finally read it. There was no ceremony, no announcement, no grand royal delivery. When Prince William finally received the letter, it was done in silence, just as Diana had intended. Those close to the family say it arrived in a plain envelope, handed to him privately, away from royal duties, away from staff, away from cameras. He read it alone. It was a day that started like any other. Meetings, briefings, the usual demands of a future king. But that letter, it changed everything. It cracked something open inside him that had long been sealed shut. Diana's words weren't polished statements. They were her truth, unfiltered and uncensored. A mother's voice speaking from the other side of grief. "I'm sorry I couldn't protect you more," she wrote, "but you were my light. You still are." Witnesses didn't need to be in the room to know what happened next. William cried, not just soft tears, but the kind of tears that come when something finally breaks loose inside. The kind of tears that don't ask for permission. One aide later described seeing William walk out into the palace garden, his eyes red, his hands shaking, not saying a word to anyone for hours. That day he didn't attend his next event. He canceled everything. He didn't speak to Charles. He didn't call Harry. He needed silence. Because that letter didn't just bring back Diana's love, it also brought back all the pain. It was the truth behind the silence he'd grown up with. It answered questions he was never allowed to ask. It gave him the raw version of the story behind closed doors, and it came from the only voice he truly trusted. There was no speech afterward. William never mentioned the letter publicly. But those closest to him say he was different after that day. Quieter, more guarded, sharper with decisions. He started stepping further away from palace politics and closer to causes that mattered to him personally: homelessness, mental health, the environment. He began shielding Kate from the same kind of emotional damage his mother once endured. It was clear Diana's message had done more than break his heart. It had reshaped it. But hidden deep in her message were not just memories, there were warnings, chilling ones that would forever change how William viewed the institution he was born into. Her silent warnings, Diana's fears about the royal system. Diana didn't trust the palace, and she didn't pretend to in her letter. She didn't speak as a royal. She spoke as a woman who had been hurt, isolated, and silenced. In her letter to William, she was clear about one thing: the monarchy would test him, not just as a leader, but as a person. It would try to turn him into someone he wasn't. It would strip away his instincts, his emotions, and replace them with rules. They will not protect you. They will shape you, she warned, but you must stay awake. She described how, for years, she was forced to smile while she cried behind palace walls, how she was told to keep her head down, how she was punished for being emotional, for being outspoken, for being real. And she feared William would suffer in the same way, that he would lose himself trying to meet expectations that no one could ever truly satisfy. She begged him, "Don't disappear into duty." She wrote that she saw kindness in him as a boy, and that she hoped it survived the pressure of the crown. But perhaps the most haunting part of this section was the line many have never forgotten: "Trust no one fully, not even in the family." Those words weren't written in anger. They were written in heartbreak. Diana had lived through betrayal, not just by the press, but by the people closest to her. And now, she was passing on that lesson to her son, not to make him cold, but to help him survive. She also warned him about love, saying, "Marry for your heart, not for your crown." She didn't want him to end up in a marriage like hers, cold, arranged, or political. She wanted him to feel free to love who he chose, not who the palace approved. In many ways, this part of the letter was a prophecy, one that explains why William's bond with Kate Middleton became so fiercely protected. Diana's fears weren't conspiracy. They were lived experience, and she put every last one of them into that letter, hoping that by reading it, William could avoid the trap she never escaped. But the letter didn't end in fear. It ended in love, a kind of love no crown could replace. That part is the most heartbreaking of all, and it's what we'll uncover next. Unspoken goodbye, the final words that broke William. As the letter neared its end, Princess Diana's tone changed. It shifted from warning to goodbye. But this wasn't a royal goodbye filled with formality. It was raw. It was soft. And it was heartbreaking. She wrote not as a princess, not as the people's princess, but as a mother who knew she might not get another chance to speak to her son. It was her last embrace, written in ink, soaked in memory. "I'm sorry I couldn't protect you more," she wrote. "I wanted to." Every day, those words, simple and quiet, are what reportedly shattered William the most. Because underneath all the royal titles and formal smiles, he was just a boy who lost his mother too soon. And here she was, apologizing for not being able to shield him from what was never in her control. Diana described holding him as a baby, singing to him at night, whispering promises she could never keep. She spoke of those early days, before the cameras, before the chaos, when it was just her and her boys, and the world hadn't yet taken everything away. "You were my anchor when I was drowning," she wrote, "and I hope I was yours." She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't try to rewrite the past. She just poured out her love, every ounce of it, into her final paragraph. And while the rest of the letter carried pain, truth, and warnings, the ending was pure, unconditional love. She reminded William that no matter what role he stepped into, he would always be her child. Not the future king, not the heir to the crown, just her son. "Wherever you go, I am there," she wrote, "and I'll always be proud." After reading those final lines, William reportedly folded the letter and held it to his chest. He didn't speak. He didn't cry again. He just sat in silence, because no words could follow something like that. That letter became more than a message. It became a part of him, and it never left his side. But buried inside those pages, between the grief and the love, was another painful truth. One that Diana never said out loud in public, but clearly couldn't die without expressing. It was about the one person who changed her life forever, and not in a good way. The shadow of Camilla, what Diana said about the other woman. Diana never named her directly, but the pain was unmistakable. In the letter, the other woman hovered like a shadow across every page. Diana didn't need to write Camilla for William to know who she meant. Her words made it painfully clear. There was always someone else, long before the world knew. She spoke about how it felt to live in a marriage that was never truly hers. How she was compared, dismissed, ignored behind closed doors. How the world celebrated the royal romance, while she was slowly falling apart inside her own home. Diana told William she often questioned her own sanity, that palace insiders made her feel dramatic, emotional, unstable, all while pretending not to see what was happening. But in the letter, she made one thing clear. "I wasn't crazy," she wrote. "I was heartbroken." She admitted she tried to fight it, that she held on for William and Harry, that she believed, maybe just for a while, that love could win. But over time, it became obvious to her that Charles's heart had already been given away. And it wasn't to her. The hardest part wasn't just the betrayal, it was having to hide it, smile in public, sit beside him at events, raise 2 boys, while the media picked apart her every move. Diana told William that she knew what the world thought of her, but she hoped her son would know the truth. "I didn't fall apart," she wrote. "I was pushed." For William, those lines cut deep, because for the first time he read his mother's heartbreak in her own words, not from documentaries, interviews, or tabloids, from her. It gave him clarity, it gave him anger, but it also gave him peace. Because he finally understood the silence behind her eyes, the distance in her smile, the fragility of her public confidence. And he knew, without question, what his mother had endured. That truth didn't change history, but it changed William. And in the next chapter, we see how that letter sparked a promise William made to himself, to Kate, and to the future of the monarchy. The promise William made. After the letter, everything changed. After reading Diana's final words, Prince William didn't just walk away with a letter. He walked away with a vow. Something in him changed. He became sharper, more protective, more intentional. Not colder, just clearer. He wasn't going to repeat the same painful cycle his mother endured. Diana's letter reminded him that beneath the crown, he was a husband and father first. He refused to let history repeat itself, especially with Kate. Insiders say he became fiercely protective, drawing firm lines between her and the pressures of palace life. He stood up to the press, sued tabloids, fought for privacy. Diana had warned him to marry for love, and he did. Now he would defend that love at all costs. "If I ever let this family hurt her, I've failed you," he reportedly told a close aide. William also began to shift his role inside the palace, less reliant on courtiers, more private, more independent. He didn't confront Prince Charles about the letter. He didn't need to. He had already heard his mother's truth. The most unexpected change was between William and Harry. Though they shared the same grief, they didn't share the letter. Diana had written it for William alone. That unspoken gap slowly drove a wedge between them, not from hate, but from the pain of what wasn't said. Still, William held to its purpose. The letter wasn't meant for public eyes. It was his guide, his compass. And every step he's taken since, the way he leads, the way he loves, the father he's become, all of it points back to a single promise: to be different. One final gift: Diana's message that lives on. Diana's letter has never been published. It's never been leaked. And it likely never will be. Because for William, it's not just a letter. It's the last piece of his mother. Sources say it's locked away securely, guarded, untouched by palace archives or public records. It's personal and sacred. But even though the words remain hidden, the letter's influence is everywhere. It shows in how William raises his children, with warmth, honesty, and emotional openness. It's in his bond with Kate, equal, grounded, real. It's in the causes he champions: mental health, child welfare, homelessness, the same things Diana once fought for. "I didn't get to say goodbye the way I wanted," she wrote. "So I'm saying it now." But maybe it wasn't goodbye at all. Maybe it was a beginning. Because that letter didn't just close a chapter, it opened a path. One where Diana's values live on through William's heart, his voice, and his choices. Her words didn't just break him. They built him. And in the end, maybe that was her greatest gift. Not a crown, but a legacy of truth. Diana's letter wasn't just a farewell. It was a mother's final gift. Its words shattered William and shaped the man, husband, and future king he became. Though never made public, its message still echoes. Her truth lives on, not in headlines, but in the heart of the son she loved most.